So we're going to talk about Paperspace today, and I'm just going to breeze over ModelSpace one more time and printing in ModelSpace, right? And I'll just tell you when I use ModelSpace to print professionally, right? Because it's not necessarily one of those things that you do all the time. In ModelSpace, when we want to print, right, we're going to hit Control P. You're going to choose your plotter, your page size, you know, what display to plot, center of the plot. You're going to uncheck Fit to Paper and choose a custom scale. Okay, so something like 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot. And I'm going to choose center of the plot. I'm going to choose window. It bumps me out of the plot dialog box, right? I draw a window over the top of the object that I want to print. Click, click. Great. You know, I get a little sense of what that scale means on an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. So maybe we want it to be like 1 inch is equal to a foot. Well, there we go, much better. I choose LaserJet, whatever orientation I want it to be. Of course, I probably should have done this in the first place. Yes. I preview it and I look at it and there's my object, right? What's really nice about printing from ModelSpace is that it's I guess you would call it a fast way of printing, right? So if you are drawing along in ModelSpace and you have your boss or your client come in and they say, hey, can you hurry and print that floor plan for me? And you had just started drawing it, right? And you could say, yeah, sure, let me just print it for you. And they say, oh yeah, make sure you print it to scale, right? Okay. So we can print from ModelSpace, we can print to scale from ModelSpace, and it's a fairly quick process, right? And I'm going to compare it in terms of being quick to Paperspace, which is what we're going to learn next, okay? So it's quick, essentially. It's quick in kind of the short term. It's not quick in the long term, right? If I'm setting up an entire drawing, I don't want to set it up so that I print from ModelSpace, because then in the end, it takes me a lot longer to print things, right? Paperspace is much quicker when you have several sheets that you're printing at one time, okay? But this gets the job done. But it has limitations as well. So it may be quick, but it has limitations, meaning when I go to print something, right, from ModelSpace, I can only choose one scale to print at, right? So if I, for example, have these two things that need to be on the same page, and this is one scale and this is a second scale, I can't, with the tools that ModelSpace affords me, I can't print those two things at different scales, right? Because ModelSpace just doesn't allow me to do so. I only have one area to choose a scale, and I can only choose one. It doesn't allow me to choose two, right? I could print this one, and then I could go back in on a different piece of paper and print this one at a different scale. But together on one piece of paper, different scales, it's not going to happen from ModelSpace, okay? Which is a pretty big deal, right, in architecture, because you're printing sheets of details and floor plans with drawings next to them that are all at different scales, right? So we need that capability. We need to be able to print multiple things on a page and have them at different scales, okay? All right, so let's talk about Paperspace, okay? So far, we've just kind of lived in ModelSpace. That's this tab down here, right? I click on it, nothing happens because I'm in ModelSpace. ModelSpace is my drawing board, okay? If I click on this layout one, click, I'm brought into Paperspace, all right? Paperspace in general, and I think, you know, unless you have to, you know, print out a very quick print from ModelSpace, the way that you want to start printing things or start thinking about printing things is from Paperspace, okay? But this is what Paperspace looks like, right? ModelSpace, click. Paperspace, click, okay? I have a couple of layouts here. Close that out. And these are both Paperspace. So you notice that we have one ModelSpace tab. You'll always only have one ModelSpace tab, but you can have as many of these layout or Paperspace tabs as you need, okay? Now let me just grab paper over here. And, oh, good, somebody left. I should have brought my gigantic scissors that I was gifted from the professor that retired, and I took his place. We'll just rip instead. Okay, So here's the idea of Paperspace, okay? You have a drawing and you've drawn it in model space, right? And it looks like this. And you have Paperspace, right? So here's your drawing in model space, and here's your Paperspace. Paperspace is essentially kind of like taking a piece of paper and just laying it over the top of your model space, okay? And then when we want to create a layout on here of drawings, 1, 2, 3, 4 drawings or whatever, right? We take Paperspace. It's going to be terrible. That one actually ripped pretty, well, somewhat straight. When we want to print something in Paperspace, we use a viewport, and we essentially cut a hole in Paperspace, and we view model space behind it, right? So we draw in model space, okay? Paperspace lays over the top of model space, and then we create holes using viewports in Paperspace to view model space. Does that somewhat make sense? This is the easiest way. That's how it was explained to me, right? I feel like this is the best way to kind of explain how it works. Otherwise, it's kind of confusing. Okay. So when I look at Paperspace like this, right, and this is just kind of a default out-of-the-box setting that AutoCAD assigns to this Paperspace setting, right? I can click on this object here. This is called a viewport, right? And my viewport is allowing me to view model space from Paperspace, right? It's acting as those scissors, right? Where you cut a hole, you view model space. If I click on this and I hit delete, right? That open hole that allows me to view model space behind is deleted, it's gone, okay? But not to worry. I can always bring it back, okay? Okay, any questions so far? Not yet. What's that? Huh? Oh, magic. No, just kidding. I'll show you in a second. I'll show you in a second. Okay, but the nice thing about Paperspace, which is what I've been saying, and I'll show you how to create these and manipulate these in a second, is that I can create one hole in my piece of paper, right? I can cut a hole, and I can view this object. I can cut another hole in here. You see I can use this first one to line it up, right, just like in model space. And I can maybe put that object in that region. And maybe I can create another one over here that's just tiny, and I can view both of them in there, right? And all of these things, whether you know it or not, right, are at different scales. So maybe I zoom really far in here. So that's at 1 scale, right? This is at a 2nd scale, and these 2 items are at a 3rd scale, okay? This is what's called creating a layout in Paperspace, right? Where I go to Paperspace, I create my viewports, I scale my viewports, and I sort of crop, you know, my views and just show what I want to show within that specific view, okay? And I do that using viewports, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. All right. So number 1, how do we create a new layout tab? How do we size our piece of paper? How do we cut holes in our paper using viewports? And then how do we print, right? Which is what we're up to today, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about today is how to create a new layout tab, all right? You can create as many of these layout tabs as you want, and they're pretty editable, okay? So by default, AutoCAD has 2 of these generated. So when you open up a brand new out-of-the-box AutoCAD, you'll have model space, layout 1, and layout 2. Okay? I'm going to click on layout 1, and here's my layout 1. All right? I can click on layout 2, here's my layout 2. If I click on this little plus sign, I'm sure you guys can imagine, right? I click on that, bless you, and I get my layout number 3. All right? When I click on layout number 3, AutoCAD says, hey, that's great. What size does this piece of paper need to be, right? Because as you guys can already sort of guess, this piece of paper back here is representing a specific size of paper, right? A letter size, or an 11 by 17, or a, you know, arch size D, which is 24 by 36, okay? So AutoCAD is saying, hey, this is great. Would you like to assign, you know, a size to it? Which we're not going to do at this just right this second. So I hit escape and a layout number 3 is created, okay? So if I don't want to click on that little plus sign, I can also right click on layout 3, and you're going to see a bunch of other settings pop up. So I right click, and you can choose to new layout. I was like, I thought we had a new layout. Yeah, new layout, right? And it creates a new layout. And again, when I click on it, AutoCAD says, hey, that's great. You have a new layout generated. What size does it need to be? Yep. No? Let's take a look. It copies the last one? So there's probably going to be some of the... Yeah, so let me show you what's probably happening. So what somebody has probably done on that computer is they have unchecked this display when creating a new layout. So instead of asking you what to assign to that page, it just creates a default one. Well, I'm going to show you in a minute how to assign, or how to create page layouts and assign them. So you won't even need to access this. In fact, I'll uncheck that. Okay. All right. So we can click on this to create a new one. We can right click here and click on new layout if we'd like. Well, we're not going to worry about from template just yet. You can rename it if you'd like, right? So if you have a specific drawing in mind, you can click on rename and type something like floor plan detail, enter. Okay. If I right click, I can choose move or copy. This will move the tab, right, into a different position in here, or it will make a copy of it, an exact copy, which you'll then have to rename. You can select all the layouts. We're not going to worry about these, but we are going to worry about Page Setup Manager in a minute. You have the ability to plot, and we're not going to worry about the rest of these. Okay. So essentially, you can create new layout tabs with your Paperspace. You can rename them, you can copy them and move them. You can assign different page sizes and settings to them. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the page sizes, right? So how do we change the page size, right? There's kind of the long way, and then there's the short way. So let me show you the short way of changing a page size so you can see how it gets set up, and then we'll talk about creating a page setup so that it's sort of like a template where you open this drawing, you say use the 11 by 17 template, and it associates all of those settings with that piece of paper. Okay. Before I show you how to change the page size though, I want to show you how you can identify how big this page is that's already there, right? Because I look at this and I think, well, you know, it looks kind of oblong, like a rectangle. It looks, you know, kind of big, small. I don't know how big it is, right? You can't really visually tell from looking at this thing on the screen what size it is. But I can use the distance command to measure it, right? While I'm in Paperspace, I can type DIST, enter, and I can just kind of come up here in this top corner, click, and this is just giving me a general overall, right? You see how when I move my cursor to the other end, it says 11 inches. Click. Great. Enter or space bar again to reinitiate the distance command. Click. And I look down there, click, 8.5, right? So this is an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, all right? And that's our default size that AutoCAD generated, okay? All right, so to change the page sizes, there's two things we can do. We can go the short route. You know, you're in a hurry, you just need to create a new page size so you can print something very quickly. The way that you're going to change the page size is through the print dialog box, okay? So Control P, and you're going to set your page up to whatever size you're going to end up printing. You're going to start with your printer, so we'll choose Adobe PDF. I don't want it to be letter size, I want it to be 11 by 17. Okay. I want to plot either the layout or extents. Okay. I'm going to choose extents, but if layout, so sometimes layout is not available, so choose extents, you know, one or the other. Center the plot. Now here we're just going to uncheck that. We're going to leave that alone, and we're going to leave the scale at 1:1. Okay, this is kind of the biggest difference between plotting in ModelSpace and plotting in Paperspace is this 1:1 scaling factor. Okay, so let's leave that alone. We are going to choose our LaserJet CTB file to print with. That's our pen, right? Our pen file. So our lines print with the proper pen weight. And we're going to, you know, change this to whatever orientation you want it to be. So if it's portrait or landscape, we'll do portrait. Okay. Now, to apply this to the layout, I'm going to click Apply to Layout. Click. Okay. So that, by doing that, clicking Apply to Layout and changing all these settings, that sets all of those settings to this piece of paper, right? So I'm going to hit Cancel now. And you see my page size changed, right? Now it's 11 by 17 portrait. So way number 1 to change the page size, go through the print dialog box. Okay? Control P. If I change this to landscape, click. And I hit Apply to Layout, click. I hit Cancel. It applies it to the layout, right? Control P. Portrait, Apply to Layout, Cancel. There it is. And what you're seeing me do here is you're seeing me change a setting. I hit Apply to Layout, and then I hit Cancel. If I were to hit OK, it would actually plot this drawing out, so it would send it to the printer and a piece of paper would pop out, right? But I don't want to do that. I just want to change the size of it so that I can lay it out, okay? All right, let me show you one other thing in the print dialog box here. Control P. Up under Name here, me personally, I don't usually set up a lot of named print settings in here, but what I do use a ton is the previous plot option. So if I change this and then I want the, you know, I want to do this to a second page or whatever, the next page I'm trying to print, I can choose previous plot and it changes this back to landscape, right? So previous plot, it changes it back to landscape. I can hit Apply to Layout, Cancel, and it goes back. Yep. Had you already set up a plot?
No.
That's probably why. You didn't have a previous plot. Yep. Control P, previous plot, and it was landscape, so it stayed there. Okay.
Mine's the same way, but I went through and did it with you before.
And you hit Apply to Layout?
Portrait, and then I hit Apply to Layout, and then mine still doesn't have a previous plot, and I switched it back and forth.
Try a couple times. It'll pop up when it's appropriate. It's one of those settings where you may not see it the first time, but then when you print a few things, it'll pop up.
Oh, you mean like if you already went, because yeah, I was following along too, and then changed really fast and everything.
So let's give it a second. I think it's going to pop up for you guys. Yeah, I think it's going to pop up for you guys. All right, so that's fast way number 1 to change your page size. Number 1 mistake students make when doing this assignment is they forget to change their page size, right? So you come in here and you're thinking, oh, I need to go into Paperspace. I need to create some viewports. I need to put these drawings in these viewports, and I need to print this. And then it says, hey, do your drawings at 1.5 inch scale and 1.25 inch scale. And you go to scale them and you think, oh, these won't scale at the right size. They're going to be way too big for the page or way too small for the page at those scales. It must be wrong, right? In that case, kind of the number 1 mistake I see happen is that you've forgotten to make sure the page is the right size, right? So the page is either way too small or way too large, and your scaled objects are not proportional on that piece of paper, okay? So it might seem like kind of a small thing, but making sure your page size is the right size is kind of it's a big deal, okay? Okay, so way number 2 that we're going to print is kind of the long direction. And this is something that you'll probably want to put in your drawing template, right? The file that you started at the beginning of the semester, the template file assignment. I'm not going to make it a formal assignment, but I'm going to let you know that your final project, if you start putting these things into your template that I tell you, it'll make your final project a lot easier, okay? So your template file right now doesn't have a whole lot in it, but when you learn how to create these, what we're going to call page setups, if you put them into your template and hit save, it's going to help you down the road, okay? So the second way that we can set up pages is by setting up templates, right? Templates that we can apply to our page. And we're going to do that by right-clicking on a tab and going to Page Setup Manager. We're going to click New, and we'll call it whatever this print is going to be, like 24 by 36 inch PDF landscape. So if I use this page setup this page setup template, the page that I apply it to will automatically turn into a 24 by 36 inch landscape and be set up to print a PDF. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK here. And now I'm going to set this up. Ooh, it looks like it's kind of getting smart on me. I'm going to set this up to print that size. So Adobe PDF, arch size D is a 24 by 36, right? We're going to choose extents, center the plot. When printing from Paperspace, the scale is always 1:1, always 1:1, okay? We're going to choose landscape, yes, landscape, and LaserJet CTV. And I'm going to hit OK. Now by hitting OK, I put that page setup template in my page setup manager. Okay, so now I'm going to hit close. I don't know if it applied it. Let me measure this piece of paper. Distance. Let's see. Yep, 36 by 24. So it did apply it. But if it hadn't, like if I go to layout number 3 and I measure this distance, and I see this is about 8.5 by 11, right? So I can see that. I can go and right click, page setup manager, click. I can choose 24 by 36 inch PDF and hit set current. And you see my page size jump behind there, right? So now if you open up your DWT file, your template file from the template assignment, right? And you create a few of these layouts in there, whenever you go to start a brand new assignment, these will live in your template along with your layers, right? And the other things that you've done in there. And it will make you starting a brand new assignment even easier, right? So when you go to start a new assignment, you don't have to create layers. You don't have to, set up your pages. They're already set up for you, right? As we move on through the semester, when you add your dimension styles and your text styles and your title blocks and your blocks and all those good things into your template every week that you learn them, at the end, right, when you open your template file, really all you'd have to do is start drawing. No layers, no page setup, no blocks, no title block to find, right? It's all in there. Okay, I hit close and now I'm ready to create my layout. Okay. Yep.
When you're setting up that with, since you have nothing drawing on your model space,
Uh-huh.
are you okay to just do the whole layout instead of
The whole, what do you mean the whole layout?
what to plot? Like the only option that extends
Oh.
options that you have nothing in model space is the template.
That's fine. That's fine. Yep. Yep. Okay. Does this make sense to everybody, right? So it's just like when you're hand drawing. When you're hand drawing and, somebody says, hey, I want you to draw this floor plan. I want it to be at 1/4 inch, is equal to a foot. And here's your piece of paper. It's an 11 by 17, right? The first thing you have to do is sort of decide what size that paper is, right? Silly to say, but it's an 11 by 17, but you at some point first had to decide what size of paper you're going to be drawing on, right? So Paperspace is no different. The first thing you need to do is decide what size of paper you're going to be printing your drawings on, okay? And that will drive the scale of items, how many things you can fit on that page, what size text you're going to put on the page, right? It will affect a lot of things. Okay. Do you guys smell that? It smells like plumbing glue. Coming in right here. You guys don't smell that? Nobody can smell, right? Everybody's sick, huh? It's making my eyes burn. That's terrible. You're like, college students poisoned, right? Well, if I pass out, you guys will know why, right? What's that? What do we do? Class is over. Class is over. Okay. All right, so we're going to set up our page size, right? And you can do it the quick way through the print dialog box, or you can do it kind of the long route, but in the long run, the easier way, right, is to set up a template. Let me set up one more template. just so that we can do it together and apply it to something. I'm going to apply it to this piece of paper, or create it and apply it to this piece of paper. And I want you to notice before I generate it that we have these objects here first. Okay, that's one thing I want you to notice. And I want you to also notice how big they are on the page. Okay. All right, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to Page Setup Manager. And you'll notice, because I'm in this same drawing, my 24 by 36 inch PDF is showing. I'm going to click on New, and we'll call this 11 by 17 PDF Portrait. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. And now I need to set up the page, right? So I go to my plotter, which is PDF, arch size D. Nope, we want 11 by 17 here. Let's see what to plot. Instead of, well, we'll choose extents if we can, but if it's not available, choose the other one, another one. Center the plot. We're going to leave this at 1 to 1. This is a confusing topic because in model space, right, I tell you, hey, choose a scale, but in Paperspace, it's going to be 1 to 1. Laser jet, this one's going to be portrait, so I click on portrait, and I'm going to hit OK. And by doing that, now I've created a second preset template that I can apply to pages, right? So I click on that, I hit set current, and watch the page behind me, right? It changes. Okay. So I had set up these viewports, right, so that they fit on an 11 or an 8.5 by 11, which is a letter size, right? Don't worry, I know I'm throwing out a lot of sizes, which is hard to get used to when you haven't worked for a while, right? But the second you start working in an office, you're throwing out sizes of papers like crazy. You get used to them. But I'd set this up on a letter size, so these viewports, they fit on a letter size piece of paper, right? Now that I've changed the page size, I'm going to have to rearrange these. M for move. Maybe I make it bigger, right? M for move. Oop, make it larger. I guess my point with this is that I generated these based on one size of paper, and if I had forgotten to change the page size or I'd done it incorrectly, these would have to be changed to accommodate that, right? If I had made this smaller, we'll do previous plot. Nope, it's Arch D. Well, it makes sense, but I'm going to change this to a letter size just to show you. Letter, apply to layout. You see now these were sized for an 11 by 17, right? And so making this a smaller size piece of paper really dramatically affects this viewport layout, right? And I know it doesn't seem like a big deal right now, but it is kind of a big deal because when you start drawing these things, you're going to forget to change the page size, and then you're going to say, oh, I remember now I have to change the page size. But then you've already laid out your viewports and they're too big for the page, and you're thinking, what am I doing wrong? I changed the page size, right? But that doesn't mean that it wasn't laid out for the correct page size in the beginning, right? So just a little note on when you're working, if you come across something like this, you know what's happened, okay? Okay, so we know the difference between model space is where we draw, and Paperspace is where we print, right? When I'm in Paperspace, okay, I can view model space using what are called viewports, which we'll talk about in a second, to see the geometry I have drawn in model space, okay? The advantage of using Paperspace over model space is that in Paperspace, I can create multiple viewports and I can put multiple items on a page and they can all be at different scales, right? That's the main advantage, okay? I can create custom page sizes for Paperspace. So I can make the page any size that I need, right? I can lay out as many viewports on it as I want, and I can scale them all appropriately, right? Does that make sense so far? Hopefully. Okay. Well, let's talk about how do we create a viewport then, right? We know how to draw. We know how to create a page layout tab. We know how to change our page size and set up preset templates for our page sizes, right? Now, obviously the next thing we need to do is be able to create layouts. We're going to create layouts by using viewports, all right? this is a viewport, all right? And a viewport essentially acts like a pair of scissors in Paperspace. So it cuts a hole, right? Whatever size you define that viewport to be so that we can view model space beyond, all right? These are generally drawn as rectangles, okay? These allow you to view model space. These objects are set to print on a non-printable layer, all right? We don't want to see these lines outlining these drawings. We don't want to see them printed, right? Because they can very easily be mistaken for other geometry, right? If, I mean, this is a silly example, but if somebody had come in here and accidentally let this print, right? And somebody were working on this detail and maybe they were building the truss. I mean, this is a really silly example, right? But if there were a line drawn here like this, maybe somebody would say, oh, we just thought this was a rafter, or it is a rafter, a truss, right? They mistook some geometry for something else because the viewport printed and started to represent something that it wasn't supposed to, okay? And we don't want that to happen. We don't want mistakes to happen. We don't want this to look like on a floor plan, you know, maybe like a piece of concrete, right? That outline looks like a piece of concrete, so we poured a concrete pad. And you're like, no, that was a viewport in AutoCAD, right? And they're like, well, then it shouldn't have printed. We didn't know that, and we thought it was something that it wasn't, right? There's a lot of lines in AutoCAD, and we don't want things that are not supposed to print, right? So these viewport objects, they will be put on a non-printable layer, okay? Let me show you how to create them. Then we're going to talk about how to create a non-printable layer, okay? Viewports are a lot easier to create now, bless you, than they were a long time. We'll call it back in the day. I'm going to click on that viewport and hit delete. Okay. If you come up to, oh, bless you. Sorry, I always forget where these are. They are under layout. Under layout, the layout tab. Over here, you'll see rectangular. If you drop down, we have rectangular, the polygon, and object. We're going to choose rectangular. Polygon will allow you to create an irregularly shaped viewport, maybe to be custom for a specific object, right? And they're very attractive, and you want to use them because you want your viewport to kind of follow the object you're generating, right? And I say this just because of bad experiences in the early days of AutoCAD, but these polygon viewports always caused issues. And we could never figure out what was happening. Things weren't printing, things were disappearing, files were corrupting, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And it ended up that every time we deleted the irregular boundary of a polygon viewport, things would work, right? They're probably just fine now. They probably worked it out and it's great, but I'm still afraid, right? So I think it's more simple is better, and I always choose rectangular, okay, as my boundary. Now, it's a pretty safe bet, and it's okay. Rectangular is okay because these aren't going to print anyway, right? It doesn't matter if they perfectly fit your object or if they're slightly too big because they're not going to print anyway, okay? So I'm going to click on rectangular. I'm going to click up in the top corner or wherever, move in the direction I want to go, and click again. That's how you create a viewport. You're not generally going to be typing in a dimension. You're just going to create a viewport, okay? And then you're going to engage model space and put the drawing that you want to see in that viewport. If you need to make it bigger, you can click on it. You can click on one of these little grips till it turns red, click, and you can make it larger, longer, shorter, right? We can narrow them up. Click, oops, click, let go of my mouse button, move, click. I can grab this little arrow, I can change, well, we'll talk about the scale in a second. I can grab this little middle button, click, and I can move it, the whole thing. Okay, MV, oh, sorry, that's a Revit shortcut. M. For move, grab it, click, enter, and I can move it about, right? So I can move this, probably not generally recommended to copy it. You want to make brand new ones every time, but I can move them, I can rotate them, I can grab them, and I can do what's called a stretch and make them larger or smaller, right? And that's really all there is to viewports, right? You generally want to make them not too big, right? but you can make them a little larger than the object you're trying to encircle. Okay. Now, once I have this viewport created, how do I then capture just the, the perfect view that I want to capture? Well, I need to engage model space through this viewport to capture the drawing that I want to see. Okay. So I'm going to click twice very fast in my viewport, and do you notice that the outline turns dark? And I'm going to pan, and I can pan, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and I can get that drawing where it needs to be. Click twice very fast outside of the viewport, and I'm out. Click twice in the viewport. I'm engaging model space at this point, right? So now I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can even select geometry. I can draw if I want to. It's not the best workflow, right? But I can engage model space, get that detail in view, click out over here, and I'm out of model space. Okay. If I get stuck in the viewport, click, and I don't remember what to do, you can also type PS, enter, Paperspace, and you are brought out of it. Okay. Now if I wanted to add another viewport, I click on rectangular, click, there's another one. Okay. I can also add down here where my object snaps are, I can click on this little customization area, and ooh, maybe we can't do that anymore. I thought we could have our viewports down here. Maybe okay, I guess not. maybe that was a few versions ago. They used to display like a little icon that you could create viewports with. But looks like it's gone. Maybe it's just my, I don't remember from AutoCAD to Revit. Who knows, right? But there is a keyboard shortcut as well, right? So if I don't want to come all the way up here to layout and go to rectangular, I can also type MV, which is make view, MV, enter, click, and I create a viewport. MV, enter, click, create a viewport. Okay, click in the viewport, and I can pan, zoom in a little bit. And do you notice, watch up here as I'm hovering over, do you see that, as I select something, it selects in all these views, because I'm really looking at the same thing in all of these 4 different viewports, right? I'm just engaged in one. Escape, PS, Paperspace, and I'm out of the viewport. Okay. So again, what this allows me to do is it allows me to have, different versions of the drawing or different drawings on the same page that I can then scale at different scales. Okay. Okay. So we have these viewports on the page here, right? We don't want them to print, right? So I'm going to show you how to make these non-printable. Then I'm going to show you how to scale them, and then we'll print. All right. So I'm going to come up here to the Home tab. I'm going to come to my Layer Manager, and I'm going to click on my Layer Properties dialog box here, pull this up. In every AutoCAD drawing that you ever work on, you're going to have a viewport layer, right? So I'm going to click on New, and I'm just going to call this Vport, enter. And it doesn't really matter what color it is. The only thing that matters is that I take my mouse and I click on that little printer, click. And by doing that, do you see that it slashes through that little printer, right? And that makes it non-printable. Okay, let me show you the difference. Preview this. It's printable because it's not on the right layer. I'm going to select these objects, change them to my non-printable layer, viewport. Nothing appears to have happened, but Control P, preview. Oh, look how wonderful it is. Yep.
So if you go back and redo that whole thing, because while you were talking, I was like sitting there struggling to pull up my layer properties.
Yeah, you want me to recreate the viewport layer?
Yeah.
Yep, let's do it. Okay, layer properties. And let me delete Well, let me undo. Hold on. Hopefully I captured it. Nope. Huh. There we go. Okay. So to create my non-printable layer, I'm going to go up to the layer manager, click on new layer. We'll call it viewport for short, right? Enter. And I'm going to click on this little plotter right here, and that makes it non-printable, right? That's it. So now I come over here, Control P, preview, and I have printable objects, right? They're printable because they're on layer 0 right now, right? I click on it, layer 0. I select these, and I can change this to viewport. Now they're on the viewport layer, right? Control P, preview, and they're non-printable. Okay. All right. So a couple of things before we move on to that I want to talk about. This is the last layer that I created, right? So if I need to create a layer after this and I hit enter, or I click on new layer, look what happens. It copies all of those physical properties of that layer, right? So if you come in after this, you create the viewport layer knowing you need it, and then you create, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh no. I create a bunch of new layers. Let's pretend, right? Look what happens. And then you panic, you go to print your assignment, you're like, it's all there in model space, I don't know what's happening, it's not printing, right? And the number one thing I say is it on a non-printable layer? And you're like, no, it's not, it's fine, it's on a visible layer, I created a brand new layer for it, right? Not realizing or remembering that, uh-oh, when you created that new layer, it just copied all of the properties of the one before it, which was non-printable, okay? Very, very, very common mistake, okay? All right, now one thing I want to say is that by selecting these viewports and changing them to the viewport layer, I'm not affecting anything in model space, right? So by selecting these, I'm just selecting the viewport. I'm not selecting the model geometry in model space and changing those layers, right? I want to make that evident so that you don't get nervous about changing these layers, okay? So now they look great, right? I have the right page size. I have all of my details on the same sheet. I have them in a viewport, right? They're showing through a viewport. The viewport is non-printable, right? And, well, let me just side note, right? When I'm grading your assignments, if your viewports print, you get points off. So just, you know, pay attention to your viewports, right? Those are easy points lost. How do we scale these, right? Final step, how do we scale these things now? And it's so easy. Well, it is easy now. It didn't used to be quite as easy. There's a couple ways we can scale these. Hold on, I need to turn that quick properties. Where is it? There we go. Which one is it? There it is. Okay. Ha, there we go. How do we scale these? If you click on a viewport, when it is selected, you're going to notice that down here, there's a little number that is displayed, the scale of the selected object, say it's selected viewport. If you down click on that, the scales all show up. So I can change the scale by selecting the viewport and clicking on the scale, 1/4 inch. Oop, nope, not what I want, right? Let's do 3/4. Better. 1.5. There we go. Looks pretty good. Okay. So one of the ways you can scale, select the viewport, use this drop down and pick the scale you want. Great. Okay. All right. Second way we can scale, you can select a viewport and you can use this little arrow drop down grip in the center, click, and choose the scale you want here. Let's say we want to see those both, so we'll do 1/4 inch. Looks great. Okay. Now we're going to select this one, drop down, we'll change this one to really large. Okay. This one, because both of them were in the viewport, it wants to keep both of them in the viewport, right? So it scaled the viewport up and said, hey, if you want these at this large of a scale, this is how big the viewport's going to be, right? It's a love-hate relationship. It's nice that they show you how big it can be, but at the same time, I don't kind of like that it undid my layout, right, to show me that. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z, Control Z. I think my preferred method is to grab this and to come down here and just figure out, you know, what scale I want it to be at. Grab this one, we'll make this click, click. I'm going to zoom into where I want this to be, click, click out, right? Grab the viewport, change this to 3 inches is equal to a foot. Okay, Control P, preview. Oh, what did I do wrong? Let's see. Adobe PDF, Arch D, center of the plot, 1:1, landscape. Was this not 24 by 36? Let's measure it. Distance 36 by 24. So Control P, Arch D, extent, center of the plot, 1:1, landscape. Let's preview. What is happening? We've got something making it shoot off into nowhere land. Let's see. It's weird. Well, here's, oh, okay. All right, that looks like maybe it was a graphic thing, funny enough, like a on my screen graphic thing. There we go. So something weird was happening. But there we go, right? So I have all of my drawings here now, and they're all perfectly to scale. They're all different scales, and they're all on the same page. Okay. Did it turn off? Huh. Did you hit a cable or something on accident? Okay. Maybe on the back you just want to kind of see if it...
Oh yeah, I see.
Did you pull one out on accident? It happens. It happens. Okay, let me just make sure. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So we're going to talk about just a couple more things today. I want to talk about kind of an old way of scaling viewports. And these days, you know, makes me sound old. These days, I don't generally have to use it a lot. In the rare case when something is just not functioning, I will revert back to this, right? But there is one other way that you can scale things through the viewport, okay? And it's by activating the viewport and typing in a scale factor, all right? Let me illustrate how this kind of, it's, I guess, what you would call maybe, I don't know, by hand way, I don't know, the manual way. But I want to show you, right, how scaling works in AutoCAD. Scaling works with a zoom factor, right? So this viewport essentially acts like it zooms things in and it zooms things out at appropriate increments to make it scalable, right? So when I have this object in model space and I change my scale to, you know, 1/2 inch, it's going to zoom it, you know, in or out by a scale of 24 by 24 times, zoom, 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 to get it to the proper size to be scaled at that increment, right? If I change it to, you know, 1 inch is equal to a foot, that's a 12 scale factor, right? So it zooms it in or out 12 by 12 times. I think 1.5 is 8 scale factor, and then 3 inches is equal to a foot is 4 scale factor, right? So it's zooming it in at bigger and smaller increments depending on the scale, okay? So the final way that you can scale a viewport is by engaging the viewport, click, click. So when I say engage a viewport, that means double click in it. And by doing that, you're engaging model space through Paperspace, okay? And by typing zoom, Z, enter, 1 over the scale factor, so 1 over 12 XP. Enter. and that scales it. Okay, let me do that one more time. This is something you likely won't use very often, but again, when you get into, you know, when there's a problem and you need to scale something, zoom, enter, 1 over 12 XP. Enter. Okay. Click, click out. Now, that is scaled at 1 inch is equal to a foot, and we did it by using the viewport and a scale factor, a zoom scale factor. Okay. Just a couple of comments about once things are scaled in Paperspace. Okay. Once things are scaled in Paperspace, they stay that way unless you engage them and break the scale. And what I mean by that is if I double click in this viewport, click, click, and I pan, I move back and forth or up or down, the scale is okay because I'm not zooming in or out, right? But if I zoom with my roller, I click, click, and I zoom, and I click, click, and I zoom back out, the scale is broken at that point, right? So if this used to be whatever it was, now it's 0.247333. That's the scale factor now, right? So it is scaled at some weird odd increment, right? So instead of me, let's choose a scale factor like 1/2 inch, or let's make it smaller than that. There we go. Instead of being 3 inches is equal to a foot, right? And I click on that, 3 inches is equal to a foot, click, click, I zoom in, I zoom out, click, click, right? And the scale is broken, okay? So you have to be careful about when you've scaled objects in a view, if you have to go back in that view to adjust what, you know, where the object is laying in the viewport, you have to be careful about that because you can break the scale of it, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but you want these scalable, you want them measurable, you want to be able to lay down an architectural scale and be able to measure them, okay?
How do you change it that way again when you enter model space from Paperspace? What do you type in?
You're going to double click and engage the viewport, and then you're going to type Z, enter, which is zoom, enter, 1 over the scale factor, XP, so 48 XP. And that's in the book too, so if you forget, it's in the book. Enter. And it will zoom it in and out. Click, click. Okay. Any questions so far? No? All right. I'm going to delete all of these. Okay. Let's see here. And I want to just, I want to create 2 viewports here, and I want to scale them. And let me just look here. Hold on 1 second, guys. Okay. Oh, bless you. I take that as a bad sign. I hope you're not getting sick. You're done for. All right. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I just want to scale these, and I want to put both of them on the same page, and I want them to be at the largest scale possible. Okay. So if you guys want to follow along and just, you know, we'll work through it together so that you have a little bit of practice. Okay. So I'm going to go to layout, and I'm going to create a new layout just for practice. New layout, click. Okay, I go to layout number 4, and by default, I get an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. Okay, let's change this to an 11 by 17. Maybe the instructions say 11 by 17. Okay, so Control P is the fast way of doing it, right? Or I can use the plot or the page setup manager to create a preset template. I'm going to go to the page setup manager. I'm going to create a new page setup, and we'll call this one 11 by 17 PDF, and this will be landscape. Okay. It bumps me into the page setup manager, Adobe PDF, 11 by 17. we're going to choose extents, center the plot. We want this to be 1:1. This one's going to be landscape. And the pens we're going to choose are going to be our laser jets. Okay. I hit OK. Yep.
Mine doesn't have extent.
Use, what is there, layout? Use layout. Yep. Okay, so by doing that, I just set a template up, right? This would be really good if you, before you begin, working anymore, if you open up your template file, your DWT file, and you add these page setups, then every time you start a new assignment with that template file, they'll be in there, okay? All right, so I'm going to use my template, 11:17 PDF landscape. I click on it, I hit set current, and you see the page size jump, and I hit close, right? So it's important, number one, to set up your page size, because if you don't, then the viewports that you generate on that page size won't be correct. Okay, I have one viewport already generated here. AutoCAD by default puts one viewport on there. I'm going to leave that alone right now for now. I'm going to use it. I'm going to move it over and create a new viewport next to it because I want one detail in this view and one detail in this view over here. Okay. Before I proceed with that though, I need to create a non-printable layer for my viewport. So I'm going to come up here to Layer Properties, click. I'm going to click on New Layer, click, and we're going to call this one Viewport. And it doesn't matter what color it is, enter. Oops, oh, I already have one. It doesn't matter what color it is because I'm going to make it non-printable by clicking on that little plotter right there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to select this viewport and drop down and make sure it's on the viewport layer. Click. I'm going to click on this corner, bring it up there, bring it down here, and I have one viewport created. Right, my first viewport was just generated by editing the one that I currently have there. My second viewport, I could go to Layout, Rectangular. I could also type MV, Make View, enter, click, click, and I create a second viewport. Okay. Now I wasn't paying attention, right? These are all things that are really hard to remember when you're brand new at this. I wasn't paying attention to whether or not I created this on the viewport layer, right? But if I hit Control P and preview this, it definitely lets me know, hey, you forgot to put that on the right layer. Click. I'm going to come back up here to Home, right? And drop down to Viewport. Right? So the normal workflow, and I'm kind of bad at this, right? The normal workflow is when you want to create geometry, you change to the layer you want to generate the geometry on, right? And then you draw it, which is a good workflow, and I try to follow it. But it doesn't always happen, right? So I end up drawing a big chunk maybe on one layer, and I go back and I change, those objects that need to be changed. I change them to the layer, whatever they need to be, using match properties or whatever, right? You'll rarely see me change my layer to the viewport layer and then draw the viewport, which again is maybe bad practice, but I know in my mind that I forget to change my layers back and forth a lot. And so if I change to viewport layer and I forget I'm on viewport layer and I go into my drawing and I draw 4, 5, 6 hours, right? And I go to hit print and I've drawn on the viewport layer, nothing will print, right? At least if I've drawn on everything on the wall layer, it prints, right? And I know it's on the wall layer and I can see it's red and I can change it easily, right? But the viewport is a little bit more tricky. So very rarely will I change to viewport and then, draw my viewports. Okay, so now I want to put this detail on this side and this detail on this side. So I'm going to click, click, engage this viewport and zoom in. Click, click on this viewport, zoom in just using my middle roller. Click, click out. Right? To scale it, you just kind of have to guess it first until you get a good sense of what your scale is going to be. So if I'm not told to scale, I'm just told scale this at the largest scale possible. I grab my viewport. I come down here, click. Let's change it to 1.5. Pretty perfect. Escape, escape. Let's click on this one. And if I had wanted to, I could grab both of them at the same time, and I could scale them both at the same time, right? I could change these both to 3 inches. Nope. 1.5. Better, right? But I want this one to be a different scale. So I'm going to click on that one alone, come down here. Instead of 1.5, let's do 3/4. Escape, escape. Looks pretty perfect, right? Okay. So I have my viewports. They're on a non-printable layer. Both of these viewports have been scaled, right? Time to print. Control P. I make sure that everything looks good, right? I hit preview. I always hit preview. I hit preview because I don't like to print one and have the viewport showing and then have to go back and print it again and save over the top of the old one, right? I hit escape, and now that the print looks good, I hit OK. And because this is a PDF, it's a digital file. Oop. We're gonna just continue, maybe. Okay, and we'll call this layout exercise. And by doing that, my PDF is generated. I did one of them, I think it was like 3 inches is equal to a foot, and the other one was 3/4 of an inch is equal to a foot. Whatever is going to make it fit. The second one, yep. Okay. So everything looks good. They both fit on the page, right? The viewports don't print. Okay. My file structure looks good, right? I have some, oops, let me look at what I wanted to look at was here. Page Setup Manager. I have some page setups created, right? Pretty ready to go. Yep. This one is 3/4, and this one is 1.5 inches. Yep. Okay. So that's all I have for Paperspace today. And I think, hold on once. My intent for today was just to have you all kind of work on this with me in class and follow along. So, and it looks like most of you have it up on the screen or working on it. So I'm not going to assign another assignment on this just yet, but you will be using Paperspace from now on to print everything. Okay. Next time we meet, we're going to be talking about text and dimensions, and we're going to be using annotative text in AutoCAD. And all of the assignments that you print from this point forward, unless you're very specifically told not to, you're going to be printing from Paperspace, right? So when I grade your assignments, I open your AutoCAD files and I look in there and I make sure that you have a layout tab created and that there's a viewport and the viewport's non-printable and it's scaled and you've done it in Paperspace, okay? At this point, like when I look at your assignments, everybody's assignments look generally really good. Common mistakes that hello.
I'm going to interrupt your class, but
That's okay.
I want to remind everybody that we're having an architectural tour tomorrow at the U. So come between 2 and 4, or just be fun.
You guys know Paul, right? He's the architecture club president.
Come over at the U, we'll have fun.
What is that I see? What do you have there?
My model.
Good. Nice. Look at your futures, architecture students. Look at your futures.
It's a lot of fun. I like this. This is advanced design.
Yeah.
So 2990
It's good. I like the colors. It's good.
brings it out.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Okay. Common things that I see happening. The most common thing I see at this point is viewports are printing, right? And those are easy points lost. Like, just make sure they're not on a non-printable layer. And you very visibly can see when you do a preview, hey, they're printing or not printing, right? It's easy to fix. The second thing that I normally will see that is pretty like an easy fix is not using the LaserJet CTB when you're printing, right? So your lines print in color and you submit a color PDF, you'll get a few points off for that, right? When I look at your drawings now at this point in Paperspace, I kind of like to see that they're lined up a little bit, right? I don't like to have one that's like skewampus all the way up here, right? Maybe just architecture in general, we like symmetry, I don't know, right? One kind of down here. I mean, unless it's intended. usually it's not, right? So I like to see things that are lined up in Paperspace and things that look nice on the page, right? But those are kind of the most common things that I see at this point happening. Most people's lines are looking really good. You have straight lines, right? They're dimensional. Everybody's getting really good at dimensions and drawing, so I think that's really good. Does anybody have any other questions? Yep.
So instead of, do you want us submitting the DWG file just so you can see the drawing and the Paperspace instead of
Yep.
the PDF?
No, I want both. I want both.
Okay.
Yes. So the DWG file and the PDF.
Okay.
Yep. That just reminded me of something and it's already gone. Where did it go? Let's see. Well, anyway. Shoot. I feel like it was kind of important too. Anyway. Okay. So on Wednesday we'll start talking about creating text. That will carry over into the next week, which Monday is President's Day, so we actually don't have class on Monday, right? So we get a little break. But that topic will carry over to next week. So no assignment for tonight, but get ready for text and dimensions and all that good stuff because it's quite intense.
So the site layouts, do you want them on Paperspace?
No, not technically, but if you want to, that would be good. I might award a little extra credit for extra efforts.
Done.
What was that?
Do we get assignments today?
No assignment for today. No assignment for today. But don't worry, there will be some in the future. Let me just stop my video here and let me get it going and then we'll be, yeah, we're done.